Welcome to Perspective, a podcast by London Business School Student Association. This is a platform where alumni share their LBS journey and share their perspectives about life at LBS, industries, networking, and anything. Joining us today is someone who does not need any introduction. If you've attended any event related to tech on campus, you know who he is. He is from the MBA batch of 2021, Mr. Giri Kesavan, and is currently the head of strategy at Comcast, a global telecommunications conglomerate. Welcome to the podcast, Giri.
Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot for joining us today. How does it feel coming back to campus? I know you're pretty active here.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm back here very, very often. Various like doing events or talking to students or meeting up with sort of other alumni. But yeah, as always, like very great to be back on campus and talking to you sort of here today as well.
Yeah. So recently I was talking to Catherine and she told me about what she does beyond her job. And I was so curious. I'm like, how do you have energy to do all this? To that, she responded, ask Giri this question.
So I think like for me, even sort of post-graduation, it was very important to make sure that, if you think about it before sort of a piece of education, you're in a very like narrow role, right? You work for a company, you do stuff, you don't really interact outside of that bubble. Also, the MBA experience to me was a huge opportunity to expand the network, learn from different perspectives, etc. So really I thought to myself, well, why stop there after graduation? And, it's such sort of a close-knit community and network. So really have actively been involved to make sure that I still make the most out of LBS and I still get, frankly, that return on investment in that degree. So yeah, always find time to sort of talk to people. I was actually saying to one of my colleagues yesterday, I love sort of interacting with LBS folk. It's just because people are coming from such different backgrounds all the time, right? Like, if you think about it, in my normal line of work, where would I sort of meet people from completely random sort of backgrounds all the time, new all the time, year on year on year. And that's really, really unique. And that's why I love getting involved.
Yes, but generally when someone's talking about thinking of going to a business school, ideally they're planning to go towards finance or consultancy. And you've come from this background that many people target. So can you walk us through your journey before you came to LBS and why you decided to leave this life that many aspire?
So, I studied a very technical degree at Imperial, so I've always been based in London in engineering. And then post that, I went into Deutsche Bank within equities trading technology, very much a product management type role. So looking after electronic trading products where the clients are essentially your trading desk. Really, really interesting role. Learned a lot about sort of the financial services industry and the finance sector. But then I kind of realized that, I missed two things. I realized I was getting very narrow and specialized into one area, like equities trading and synthetic equities. And number two, I missed building stuff that your average person on the street can interact with and say. And, for me, that was the real catalyst to be like, okay, actually, I'm doing well at my job. That doesn't mean that's what I am passionate about. And these two things are very different. And sometimes, especially early on in your career, you conflate these two. So that for me was like that turning point to say, like, I need to think about this a bit differently. And at that time, an MBA made perfect sense. How do I get myself out of that narrow environment, broaden myself in terms of exposure to a whole host of industries, a whole host of people, and really have like a more international type of outlook on my career rather than like one company, one job after undergrad. And that was really the catalyst for applying for the MBA.
And so when you decided to leave that job and apply for the MBA, were you sure where you would see yourself in the future? As you said, you wanted to think out, take some space. But did you have this like idea, okay, wait, I want to work in this industry or do these kind of roles?
Yeah. I think like for me, it was less sort of, okay, this is exactly sort of what I want to do. And here's like the mechanism to get there. For me, and actually I only applied to sort of 2-year programs for this exact reason. For me, a whole part of the MBA was actual exploration. Like where else in your career would you have sort of 2 years to explore different industries, try different things, and then sort of hone down into what you were really like interested in. I mean, I went in with themes that it wasn't like I came here and like applied to everything. I knew that I wanted to be in the tech space for sure. I knew I wanted to be in a type of role that was much more focused on product and product management, because I love the idea of like building something, shipping something, and then having others use it, interact with it, learning from it, etc. So I really enjoyed sort of that aspect of the role. So yeah, I think for me it was like I knew I wanted to be in tech. Where, which companies, what types of roles, all a bit vague. But I knew, I used the MBA to sort of narrow down into sort of, okay, what are like the exact areas of tech that I wanted to be interested in. I think the other angle I would say, like for me, is I was very keen to leverage the combination of skills of a highly technical background with that layer of commercial and business and strategy acumen. I think it's a very unique skill set. It's a very powerful skill set where in my roles, I knew that I could enter roles where I could dive deep and talk to engineering teams and architecture teams and product teams, but also elevate up and talk strategy and write like killer presentations and these kind of things. So it was something along this, but what exactly that was, I didn't really know until sort of so much through the program.
I mean, fair, like it's most of the time, even though we have an idea or we think we have a direction, I think a lot of us have a mindset change. And especially I've heard this from the MBAs, like 2 years, what they thought they wanted to do and what they're doing after the MBA
100%.
is different in a lot of times.
Yes.
But that, so that's nice. You were open to like the exploration part, but you had the idea of what you wanted to
Of
do.
course.
And once you stepped into the campus, what was your strategy? What kind of activities did you get involved in, or what kind of events did you start going to?
Sure. So, if I talk about sort of, I wanted to really blend this sort of technical bit with like the strategy bit. So, really was involved more from the event side in like consulting club and so on, like learning what is like management consulting, what is the sector even about? Like, I'll be honest, when I was in banking, I barely did like slide decks, right? It was much more numerical as a role. So very rarely did sort of pure like slides, etc., or quote strategy. So really like the consulting club and sort of the experiences in the program that teach you how to think about sort of strategy or how to do structured problem solving. I think that was sort of one area. And then the other area really was the tech and media club. And not only like the club, but more broader involvement in technology at LBS, because, I came into the campus like with a technical background and I looked at the school and was like, okay, there's an interesting opportunity here of how do you create a set of a value proposition that mixes the technical side as well as like the business side. And you see that play out, in people's like careers post the program now. So I was very involved in like the tech and media club, shaping events that really connected students to industry. So getting alumni in to sort of speak, doing international treks. So we like take people out from the school out into industry in various locations, etc., to get an experience of the sector, as well as more education pieces, right? Working with our own faculty at LBS and faculty at other business schools to think about, okay, what is the future of this industry and how do we think about it? So really, like for me, when I was running co-president of the tech club, it was really about nothing to do with jobs. It's like, how do you educate people about the sector? How do you inspire people to learn more about the sector? And how do you motivate people to take that next step? And this was kind of where my involvement was focused.
So the tech club essentially became exposing the MBA candidates to an industry that most MBA candidates might not look into.
Correct.
And would you say that helped from a recruiter's point of view as well?
Yeah, sure. So I think like tech in general is not typically an industry that knows about sort of what an MBA is or does, especially in Europe, right? Like, maybe in the US and in other markets. And that goes with the students as well. So when we're running these sort of events and, I'm trying to do stuff like, okay, look, you really need to think about like data skills or like storytelling with data. Sometimes even students don't understand the value of that because they haven't been exposed to that industry, right? So a lot of it for me was about educating the students about sort of the sector, as well as educating the sector about the students. So it was really like two ways. And I worked a lot with the Career Center on this to articulate like, okay, what are the skills that we need to teach in the degree programs at LBS to position people for careers in the tech space? Because the answer isn't just the degree certificate. If you think about it, consulting and MBAs have had like such a long history,
Right.
Years and years. So the students know exactly what the deal is. The companies know exactly what the deal is. Tech is very new, ever changing. The roles are completely like different. So it was very much sort of a two-way street in terms of how we brought all of this sort of together.
Right. And you mentioned that you spoke with the university, you spoke with the career services, and you wanted people to have more data skills, more analysis focused. And that's interesting because right now I was reading this article by Microsoft that talked about 40 jobs that AI could replace. And one of them, data scientist is. Now, all of us know the importance of the skills. There's talk everywhere that data skills are important. Given that people call it irreplaceable by AI, how do you see a business valuing these skills? Where exactly?
Sure. The way I see sort of data skill sets in general is in three sort of categories. Firstly, you need to actually like produce data. Well, sort of, there's a process, right? Like you get data, you analyze it, and typically on various tools. The next step, think about what insight are you deriving from that data set? These like that first piece can be automated and should be automated in sort of many situations. That second piece is a bit more nuanced. So, the insight that you derive from data and how you make sort of decisions from data is a core part in every business, right? There's a huge skill in still driving insight from data. Again, you could argue that sophisticated AI could again like provide sort of insight. The piece where AI becomes really tough is, especially in the data landscape, is how you communicate data. If you think about it in my role in terms of strategy roles, etc., the data might say this, but you are selling a story, you're selling a narrative. How are you getting very senior executives rallying around a concept that's anchored in data? No one's going to look at an Excel spreadsheet. So for me, it's really about like the skill set is storytelling with data. It is not pure data analysis. And this is a bridge that I think a lot of people, need to develop. And it's one of the things when we're working with the school actually in developing sort of data analysis type courses, it's always like, I'm not training you to be data scientists. Like, let's be clear. You need to understand like how to communicate this stuff in a crisp, like succinct way to influence and drive decisions. That's a skill which prompt can't help you with, because it really ties into sort of the emotions of the individual, how you're presenting a story, how you're tying different threads together, how the narrative like hangs from a senior audience.
Right. And so you mentioned that you were looking closely with the tech and media club. Tech space was what you were focusing on. And how was the recruitment looking for you? How did you start about it? What kind of roles were you looking at? And were these roles that were common for MBAs, or that's something that was a bit niche and relevant for your skill sets?
Sure. So I think in the tech space, there's no common role for MBAs. Like, in consulting, you could say like, right, like I'll become an associate, etc. So I think like the common roles wasn't there. And that's what made recruiting hot. I think a couple of things happens in sort of the tech space when it comes to recruiting. Typically, there's limited on-campus recruiting, right? So it's not like all of these like tech companies are coming to campus, knowing the exact value proposition of a master's student or an MBA and are hiring en masse. So that's hard. So you kind of have to go what we call like lateral recruiting, right? So you have to find your own roles, network with alumni and like network with the company and apply as if you're on the open market. And it's also very hard to find the type of role, especially like the leveling. So, if I looked at roles in chief of staff, strategy, product management, product marketing, business operations, these things mean different things in different companies and have various different seniority levels. That is very hard to navigate. So it's a very unstructured way of recruiting. It means it's more of a high risk, high reward like strategy ultimately, right? Because you have to work much harder, I think, to get those types of roles. That's exactly what I had to do as well. I looked at sort of like roles that were sort of available across like chief of staff, business operations strategy, transformation. I knew that I wanted to do something that covered, back to our conversation on themes, I wanted something at the intersection of like tech, media, product management, and strategy. So these were like the skill sets that I was looking for in a role. And then it was about, okay, how can I connect with that company, in this case, Sky? So got in touch with an alumni referred to me, learned about the company. So it was all very, it's interesting. Like there was an on-campus recruitment, but I wouldn't have been able to get this role without LBS, because ultimately it was through alumni, through the connections of the school, through the recruiting advice from the school.
A lot more uncertain, but you've mentioned the roles like product manager, chief of staff, product marketing officer. Would you say these are more of your generalist skills that would be needed?
Yeah, I think it, again, depends on each company.
Okay.
Some companies take a very technical approach to product management, right? So, you would not get product roles without like an engineering background. Other companies take a much more generalist view. I think this is where how one of the challenges in terms of these roles is how you position your own experience tailored to that, right? So, as an example, as I said before, like these companies don't know what a master's is or what an MBA is, etc. So they don't know the skill set. So just saying like you have that degree doesn't actually mean anything. You kind of need to articulate what is the value of the degree? What are the skills and experience that you learned in the degree that will be really useful to drive forward the aims and outcomes of that company and of that role. So for me, it was really important on how I articulated the skills that I had learned in the MBA in like my CV, cover letter, and application in sort of general.
So as you mentioned, you had the technical pedigree before you came, but once you started working, what were the skills that you learned over the 2 years of your course at LBS that really helped you grow within your organization?
I think there's a couple of things that really helped at the start of my career, to be honest. Like, I talked about sort of very technical and I want to elevate it up to sort of a business context. I think structuring and how to do problem solving, like for sure, was a huge element, like how to write good slides, etc. These are things that sound so basic, but are actually such a powerful way of like communicating and conveying narratives and messages, etc. So how to engage stakeholders and how to translate sort of technical complexity into commercial clarity and business clarity, like that skill was very, very key. It's something I practiced at LVS a lot. I think elements of how you negotiate and influence without direct authority is so key. Right. So, you might not have any direct reports, but you are trying to influence in roles like outside of your sphere, right? Like across the product organization. So how does that happen? How do you gain trust, build relationships, create impact? These are kind of things that we did on a day-to-day basis in the program, right? Whether that was in your study groups or sort of running treks, etc. It's like a microcosm of that environment where, ironically, again, you are dealing with people in your professional roles that have different levels of experience, different background. It's the same thing as what you were doing in the degree programs. So it's just that on like another level. So I think for me, it was not the technical academic content. It was more the soft skills that really, like, I look back on this sense of like, actually, I couldn't have done that if I had stayed in banking. Like I would not be able to talk like that, communicate like that, present like that, influence like that, or drive work like that. And I think that's, for me, a huge element of the program.
Right. And so coming back to your journey, as you mentioned, you had more skill sets, more of the soft skills. And how did you progress? How did you leverage these skills now to grow in your career and to be in the current position that you are? So could you walk through like the role you joined and the progression you've had since then?
For me, one of the key things was career growth was far more important post MBA rather than necessarily like immediate financial like ROI or return or quote prestige, which for sure I don't think is a good metric sort of gauge your career. So I was really on the lookout like at Sky for and I really chose this particular role because I knew that it would give me a platform to grow and grow quickly. So I joined in the streaming team, which is now sort of the Peacock, and looking after like our streaming propositions and global streaming, much more into product and strategy type role. I joined as a strategy manager. And then, again, a lot of the projects I was involved in there actually was a little bit more pure product management, which was great because I was able to like, again, leverage my technical skills, create sort of consumer facing products, etc. And so on. So really enjoyed sort of that element of the role. Evolved as I became sort of more senior, got promoted to senior strategy manager, so like the next level up. And that was more looking after, not only streaming now, but trying to drive cross-functional like strategy and transformation across a much broader entertainment product portfolio. So think about Sky in Europe, etc., across like the entertainment propositions. So just, what are we doing with TVs? What are we doing with apps? What are we doing with set-top boxes? All of these kind of like elements. So it was about like the entertainment landscape. And then, I was fortunate enough to get promoted to head of strategic transformation. So, what we do is we're part of like the chief of staff team and we are there to really partner with our team to sort of accelerate performance and drive impact and connect the dots between the organization to create value. So a lot of the work that I do now is about how to drive transformational change. How do you take something from 0 to 1? You might have set the direction, but how do you take it from 0 to 1? And that requires galvanizing change, getting people along the journey, driving consensus, project management, etc. So really like very broad nature of the role. And for me, like the amazing thing is I get to do that across Comcast and Sky, which is amazing. I love the fact that, I work with our teams in Philadelphia as well as London and other locations to truly sort of drive things. And I love the fact that, I worry as much about Sky's business in like the UK as I do with like Xfinity Cable in North America. And we're like 4,000 miles away from the US. So I love that element of the role. And that's why I really love the nature of the job, because you're truly looking at influencing the direction and shaping and enabling a product organization to drive change for millions of users across the world, whether that's through entertainment, whether that's through broadband, mobile, smart home, all of these things. And that's a fantastic scope, to be honest, which is why, and I think like that, I could see that the role could go somewhere like there. Obviously like stuff changes and the organizations change. But for me, when I joined Sky, I knew that actually this is a place where I can see myself really grow. And thankfully, through a mix of luck, and there is like a luck involvement in all this, right? Through a mix of luck and work, that has fortunately turned out to be a very good career progression within that role. But I generally have fun at the job, and that is very underrated in careers, I think, post LBS. Like people think like, oh, I should go into this role because it feels like the right thing, or it feels like that's what you should do. It's like, are you actually passionate and having fun? That's the question I think you should be asking yourself.
It's really nice. Not a lot of people who work a full-time job say that they have fun in their job. It's rare. There are so many things that could go wrong on a day-to-day basis. And one of the things that could go wrong, especially in the tech domain, is being prone to layoffs, to market corrections. I feel it's noticeable how much layoffs are directly correlated to recessionary markets or AI developments. And how would you say one should be developing their skills to differentiate themselves? And would you say there are some more of your soft skills beyond your technicals that help you stay more relevant and hard for you to be replaceable in a tech organization?
I very much think of sort of that is, how are you enabling not only your success, but others' success? How are you amplifying your impact? That's a really key sort of skill set to have. Like, how are you championing others' impact? Because then it becomes, your impact is elevated in the organization, right? Because not only are you doing well, but because of you, others are doing well. Because, your impact is just like snowballing. So I think that's one thing. I think the second thing comes back to sort of what I was saying in terms of sort of the network and keeping in touch with LBS, right? Like, I think a lot of the way I think about my role is like, sure, I'm employed by Sky and Comcast, and, I have my role, but I feel like I am an industry participant and not just a company employee, right? Like, I'm in the technology and media space and interact all the time with sort of the MBAs who are like, for example, Amazon. We're like, hey, like, how's it going? Like, what's happening? Like, what's new? Like, so, a lot of it is about being an industry participant as well. And I think that elevates the impact role, because you are bringing in new perspectives to your role every day, right? Well, within reason, right? You're bringing new perspective. So, when I'm working on projects, like, I've got in my mind, like, well, actually, I know like 3 people who have done this at this company, and they thought about it this way, and then this is how we can think about it. That's very unique. So I'd say like that's sort of the second thing. And I'd say the third thing is have a diverse skill set. It can't just be like one thing that you're known for. Like, be known, I think, for multiple things, and be reliable and dependable. And I think it's, again, easy to say, hard to do. And I would also just add that I think the attitude to work is as important as like the work you're actually delivering. Are you like, I always say to my team joke all the time. They're like, oh, you have way too much energy and they're like way too bouncy. For me, that is really important. Like, I genuinely enjoy sort of the work. It's that enthusiasm and energy is infectious. It means that others buy into that as well. And I think, like, for me, that personally is a really important trait that people should be bringing into work. A lot of it then is about building your skills of resilience, especially when you think about sort of the broader market. Like, how are you building skills in resilience and dealing with ambiguity, and how are you defining your career around resiliency, I think, is so important.
So what you've shared so far obviously is a lot of advice for many people of having to be able to accept failures when they do happen. And throughout the conversation, be it you getting your first job at Comcast or your guidance for the future candidates, you spoke about networking. And I feel a lot of people make mistake while approaching networking. What are some mistakes that you've noticed people make at LBS or outside? And how would you guide for someone listening to the podcast that they should approach networking to make the maximum utilization of the opportunities that they have?
Sure. So I think a lot of this as a broader point is that when you're networking, when you're learning about sort of the industry, when you're trying to figure out like what it is about like the tech sector or the media sector or product management, you want to become an industry participant. You don't become an industry participant by asking people for jobs. You become an industry participant by learning about the industry and being authentic. And I think, like, for me, like, the biggest sort of mistake I see people making is that, their networking conversations are very transactional. It's very like, I did this, you're here, I would like a referral. And it's very sort of transactional. Whereas, alumni and people lean into their expertise, right? So it's not just about a job. It's about sort of what can you learn from them? Like, what can you learn from their experience? Like, because they might not have roles, but they might know people who do. So how are you leveraging their network? So for me, it's about how do you authentically network? So that means less about, I found a job, can you refer me? It's more about, I'm really interested in this sector. Here's my opinion on it. Key thing for tech, like, come with an opinion, right? Especially if it's in product. Remember saying this in my Sky product interview when I first joined. It's like, the app, like, here are like the 5 things I would change. Like that, again, I'm becoming a user, right? Like, how can I do like a product strategy if I'm not a user? So come with a perspective and say, okay, here's how I can help you. And, here's what I want to learn about. That's a much more authentic and frankly interesting way. And builds your network over time. So the other mistake I see students make is like, I'm recruiting now, so now is when I start building network. Actually, building your network starts before you join, during, and after. I mean, we joked earlier in the podcast how, one of my very close friends from LBS is ironically Prayal, who's like an MBA 2024. We never even overlapped. That's authentic networking, right? Like that's us, becoming friends, like learning about LBS, like driving impact, all of this, etc. So continue that after graduation as well, because the people who don't have the opportunity of studying at this school will find it much harder to do that. Like if I asked anyone like right now who didn't study or have like the network that we all do at LBS, and they're like, God, we need to think about this, and I need to know how this works at like 5 companies, and like let's bounce some ideas. How would you do that? Like without sort of that network? So really important, I think, to continue the networking, continue sort of being authentic, and you never know where, that will help you out in your career. And you know what, even if it doesn't help you out in your career, it will help your perspective. And I think like that's really, really important. And that is essentially the title of the podcast as well. So that for me is like really, really important. It's like, how are you bringing a perspective, how are you drawing perspectives from others, and how are you shaping that into creating impact in your career, and that's so key.
Right. This conversation, we spoke about a lot of things: your journey before LBS, your work, your time at LBS, and your overall outlook for recruitment in tech or in general, and the kind of mindset one should have. I feel there's a lot of learning for everyone listening, and I thank you for joining me on today's podcast.
No worries. Lovely to be here. Thanks so much.
Yeah.